and welcome to another YouTube exclusive here on the From the Q podcasting network. We are going to be continuing our discussion of X-Men 97 episodes 5 and 6. We've been doing an every other week recording. Although I guess if any episode was going to justify recording immediately after it, it was going to be episode 5. But we will be discussing a monumental episode of this TV series a little bit later. My co-host is Brian DeBrain. I'm Jerome Cuson. Please find us on social media platforms like this. This is a YouTube exclusive. Like and subscribe. You can also find us on podcasts on Apple and Spotify as well. So please go ahead and do all that. So I think we want to get into this really important episode 5 of X-Men 97. And I think that all that can be said is Bo DeMaio has been very quiet since he was summarily fired just before the season premiered. But DeMaio released a very long series of tweets, kind of talking about the reason that they came back to do this series, and essentially the first 4 episodes are kind of a warm up. And with X-Men 92 being kind of a Saturday morning animated TV show, DeMaio essentially wanted to recreate the feeling of how September 11th kind of ended the innocence of so many individuals who would have been 13 to 14, 15, 16 years old, fans of the X-Men, the animated series, and then becoming teenagers and adults. And that event, 9/11, being kind of a wake-up call, I guess, in some ways, and really just changing the way that people see themselves and see this country and just everything that 9/11 represents. The one thing I also want to add to this is that there's a lot of discussion about 9/11 imagery. We heard this conversation with something like Man of Steel and just the imagery specifically. But what I think DeMaio and his crew are going for is the feeling of 9/11. And that's really what episode 5, I mean, it is so monumental, dealing with the death of one major character, the teased death of another major character. We're going to kind of break it down very shortly. But Brian, I know that this was very emotional for you and also extremely impactful because, I mean, look, they could have done like versions of episode 1 for an entire season, and I think people would have been satisfied because the quality of the animation has been so good, and just the idea of combining powers, this is something that we've really seen. But episode 5 is truly something monumental, and it feels pretty earth-shattering. I mean, I can't think of anything that the MCU has done basically since Endgame that had the feeling of episode 5, and that's probably the ultimate compliment that I can pay this.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling that everyone seems to be having, this Infinity War shocking moment. I was shocked. I still can't believe what happened. Just the idea of Genosha being destroyed. I mean, it's been written in the comics, and when people saw this coming, so to speak, but not in the way that they set you up and kind of lower your guard down, especially when right before the attack is like this great dance sequence with Rogue and Magneto, and it's throwing you back to the 90s, and they're playing an Ace of Base song from 1997, and it just fits perfectly. And then all of a sudden you see Cable, and he's like, "Mom, I'm sorry." I'm like, "Oh my God, no, what has come?" And then all hell breaks loose, and it's like a giant, I don't know. I mean, it's 5 times the size of a normal Sentinel, whatever that monumental Alpha Sentinel was. Who knows who sent it? It was probably Mr. Sinister.
How dare you, Mr. Godzilla fan? That was a Mecha Sentinel if I've ever seen one.
Listen, I'm hesitant to use the word mecha in anything because that thing had 3 moving heads. Like oh my God, it was beyond anything creative Godzilla monsters have ever come up with. I think because the way that thing moves is like they designed purposely, where it's got the 3 heads rotating, and it's gigantic, and it's big, and it's got nukes on it. I mean, the thing was shooting nukes, for crying out loud. I mean, not even Godzilla can shoot it. I mean, he can shoot atomic breath, but a fucking nuke, my God. And then just destroying the whole island was just so hard to watch. Like, I couldn't believe I was watching this destruction. What really got to me was they were like you could audibly hear the screams of the mutants dying, and I just thought it was just bone chilling. Like that, they went so far as to make it so realistic. Like it felt like watching a dark anime. It didn't feel like watching Saturday morning cartoons anymore. That transition It just went, oh, we're going to the hard anime now, and that's exactly what they did. And man, not only that, but just like the idea of the Gambit being the third wheel, and that whole dialogue between Gambit and Rogue before that was just so heartbreaking. It's like I think we've all kind of been in that position where you're kind of in that flirty type of relationship and you don't know where it's going to go, and then you kind of just cling on to that and don't say anything about it so it can last, and then all of a sudden you throw your feelings on the table and everything just changes. And that's what happened with Rogue and Gambit. It just sucks that I feel like Rogue realized it too late that Gambit's the one, man. It took a dance with Magneto to figure that out, but it was way too late. And I mean, she should have known that him watching her dance with Magneto like that would break his heart. I mean, come on. But she did it anyway, and then it made her realize that, oh, I want Gambit. But then it becomes too late because Gambit does the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate quote, remember me, mon ami. Oh my God. And then we see Gambit use his powers beyond any level we've seen before, more than just fucking cans and cards and bullshit like that. It was just like, we could have done this the whole fucking time. Like, but maybe he didn't realize that. I don't know, because he had to insert his fucking stick to initiate the fucking explosion on the Sentinel. So I don't know, man. It was just like, I wish he figured it out earlier and not sacrifice himself, because man, if he would have just like stuck it on his foot, he would have been able to blow up the Sentinel if he just stuck it on the dude's foot. But no, he got stabbed, and yeah, oh my God, very very dark stuff. If I was watching this as a 13-year-old, I think I would have just like completely lost it and just like, what the hell, man, what's going on? And speaking to a lot of my friends, the consensus is we need a time travel moment to happen and not let this settle because it's too dark and real. Like if this sticks, it feels like, man, we really lost our whole childhood, man. Because like Gambit was so cool as a kid, and seeing him even now, it felt like he went even to another level with the way he sacrificed himself and the way he just was like totally like unselfish in the whole situation, didn't think nothing of it, and just knew what to do. And it's like, that's a true hero. And it sucks, man. And I hope he somehow comes back, but I don't know. And I just feel bad that like he got his heart broken right before it. That's what makes it worse, I think. So yeah, and I don't know. Enough about Gambit. Let's talk about the other love triangle going on.
Well, I do want to echo a lot of what you said, and I think that what makes the Genosha part of it work so well. I think it says a lot that you talked about the death and destruction, and you didn't even mention the fact that Nightcrawler is in the episode. I mean, that's the crazy thing, is that we get the reintroduction of Nightcrawler, the same voiceover artist doing the voice, and it was really great to see him. It was really great to see him in the open of the next episode. Even though it's funny, he's in the open, but he's not actually in the episode. I have to imagine he is going to play a huge role in these final 4 episodes. But getting to see Nightcrawler, getting to see Genosha, getting to see some of the dynamics at play. We got the Hellfire Club having to interact with a Jean Grey clone, which was fascinating. And I mean, you could have gone so many directions with that, but they chose not to. We got a little bit of Emma Frost. I'm curious to know if, like, because obviously she plays a big part in the comics, especially when they get to like the Astonishing X-Men. So we'll see if she plays a role at some point. But yeah, you get a little bit of the Hellfire Club, and you get kind of the political dynamics. And I love when Magneto makes a mention of leaders being terrorists. I think Magneto's just had some all-time great lines in this show. I mean, basically the idea is that Gambit is dead. We see a body, but Magneto, like they say, the Omega threat's been eliminated, but that doesn't mean he's dead. And based on what we see in the next episode, I think it really does lead us to believe that Magneto is alive, and we'll see in what form that takes. But we'll get to that shortly. But Magneto has the great line about terrorism, and I love that he sees what's going on around him and kind of flashes back to the Holocaust. And then one of the things that he says is in German to leak, and it's extremely powerful. And I think the love triangle stuff is really well done. I think it really does differentiate the X-Men from the rest of the MCU, because this is kind of a soap opera, and you get those personal dynamics that you haven't really gotten in any of the Avengers movies. And in many ways, this feels like an actual adaptation of what Chris Claremont was intending to do. But in terms of that plot line. Again, just great to see Nightcrawler. I almost wish we could have seen more of Genosha before the destruction, but it was great to kind of get a sense of like this being potentially mutant paradise and what ends up happening. And obviously, there are going to be a lot of ramifications that come from this, and we're going to kind of have to assess like who's dead, who's alive. Some of the Morlocks definitely look like they died, so we will see how that goes. Before we go to the next love triangle, anything to say about Nightcrawler?
Well, I mean, he tried at the end to save some people, and the poor dude got knocked out by the sheer level of the explosion that he was protecting Rogue and Gambit from. So I don't know, man. It's crazy, but it's cool to see like the powers being used. Like it feels like they're starting to learn from X-Men 2 finally on what to do with Nightcrawler and just use him like that. And they did it perfectly, but he just wasn't enough to save everyone else. So I'm glad he's on the official team roster now, I guess, but we'll see how he officially joins the team because he still feels like he's still an outsider. But of course, if you put him in the opening credits, he's going to be a member. So I'm guessing they're going to recruit him and kind of ask him what went down that night and go from there. But yeah, this love triangle, like I mentioned, man, Rogue just was a little too late, man. But it happens. That's real life. Sometimes we're just a little too late and throwing our feelings out on the table, and you get burned.
And a great voiceover. I mean, just the voiceover work on this show has been really great. And Rogue telling Gambit, "I can't feel you." I mean, that is the kind of thing that's going to stick with you. And I know that this echoes something else that you brought to my attention.
Well, it was I think New Rockstars brought the comparison to Vision and Scarlet Witch, and it's almost the exact same line. And it's when, Vision is like completely dead and Scarlet's back and she's holding the body. I think we saw that in WandaVision. So that was just, Marvel likes to parallel themselves and kind of redo some of the stories in different ways. And this is kind of one of them. But in this case, it's like it felt more adult and it felt more real, especially with all the blood and the tears and the distraught in her voice. I felt like she nailed the line better than Elizabeth Olsen did. So, but it's hard to say because she still did a good job as Scarlet Witch. But man, I think the return of Rogue, I forget her name as the voice, but man, she really is nailing it. More so than some of the other recurring voices. But I think her and Storm are the ones that are like bringing that nostalgia and making it feel like it's still the same continuity. Wolverine, a little too old, I think now, but still, I think Storm and Rogue are the ones that are like carrying that nostalgia in terms of the voices.
I mean, Wolverine also hasn't gotten a lot to do, to be fair. I mean, Wolverine has barely been in these first 6 episodes, and it feels like a direct response to the critiques of the movies. But like I've said, I believe that it's just as much of a problem with the TV show as well. You do get a little bit of Wolverine in this episode. He is interacting with Jean, the real Jean Grey, as she's kind of trying to figure out her memories and kind of assessing things. And Wolverine, if anybody can identify with having trouble with memories, it is of course Wolverine. So they connect on this this very different level. And Jean kisses Wolverine, and Wolverine's like, "Yeah, this isn't right. You need to go talk to Scotty Boy." And then Scott and Jean kind of get into a discussion, and I guess Scott Summers is having an emotional affair with Madeline Pryor, as only you could do if you're mutants and have a psychic link.
I mean, they had a kid together. What can you say? It's like they're always going to be bonded for life, no matter what. So it's like one of those things of like you have a kid with someone and you're divorced or something, you're still going to have some emotional moments with that person down the line, So
Yes.
I get it. I totally get it. That's a real thing that happens in real life when people cheat or find out someone's cheating on them and move on and then come back to their old girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. So it's real. And I almost want Wolverine to just be with Jean now at this point because that seems like what Jean wants now. And then just have Madeline just be with Cyclops and everyone's happy. Like, it's weird, but it's not as weird as like when, fucking Rick and Morty does it and you have the Beth clone just having sex with actual Beth.
We're not talking about them on this show, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's too much. Like, don't do that. But in this case, I think Madeline Pryor is like really the better suitor for Cyclops, and Jean's really the better suitor for Wolverine. I don't know. That's what they're showing to me, and based on the chemistry, it's like, why not? You don't have to follow the comics exactly, and we know they're not doing that anyway. But man, that would be something new. You know what I mean? Imagine that. Imagine like a half episode B storyline of them on a double date at a restaurant.
Oh my
Dude,
goodness. I mean, that would certainly be something else. What if they have to share an apartment together or something like that, like a real
oh my God, give
classic
him a sitcom.
sitcom?
Yeah, perfect. And it works
Cut the
because
room in half.
they
Make it a
clearly,
Mojo. Make it a Mojo episode, and it's a sitcom.
oh my God, because they clearly made the distinction of how Jean and Madeline are. And at this point, I feel like Madeline is like the nicer one, which is so strange to say because they're clones, but it
I
just
mean,
feels like
Madeline's the more chill of the two, apparently. I think Cyclops and Jean are going to end up together. I just don't think there's any possible way they're going to let Wolverine be happy. So that's kind of where I come down at. But I will say, I think you can make a plausible argument for both Cyclops and Jean being right when they argue about Cyclops' emotional affair and going over Jean's memories and things like that. I think you can make a plausible argument. But the other one of the kind of setups for the episode is that there's a news reporter there and interviewing the X-Men kind of about what's happening, and they're trying to avoid the idea of all this dirty laundry coming out. And part of it is the fact that Cyclops did indeed have a kid, and where that kid is now is certainly up for question. But yeah, this episode is a lot. This was 28 minutes, and boy, oh boy, this really got into some very dark territory with two sets of love triangles. I mean, one of them is almost like a love rectangle at this point. But I mean, it's just this. This is the most important episode of the season, and it really feels like they knew when they had 10 episodes. Like this is clearly like the big mid-season finale, and it really just changed everything. It really opened the doors to where it feels like anything could happen in a future episode. And I think it's pretty wild, just the places that they've gone in these first 5 episodes.
my one thing though is that like I've always never ever trusted the Hellfire Club, so I'm just wondering. I'm trying to think back, like as I watched this episode like 2 or 3 times, but if we saw members of the Hellfire Club get killed, because I wonder if they were in on it, because I just feel like that's their MO. But that's just me. But I guess people can change, but I don't trust them. So we know Emma Frost can change, but I don't trust the rest of that Hellfire crew. They're just sons of bitches, and they're just trying to hold on to old ways deep down. So I never trust people trying to hold on to the old ways like that from like 100 years ago, and even talk like that. So I never ever get any good vibes from the Hellfire Club.
So after a monumental episode 5, like it was very clear reading the plot summary from episode 6 and knowing that it was part 2 of an episode that was part of episode 4, we knew there was going to be a lot of Storm. What we didn't know is there was also going to be a lot of Charles Xavier. We saw Morph as Xavier in the first episode, and he is still part of the opening credits, but we get an extended look at what Xavier's life is like as part of the Shi'ar. We get references to the Kree. We get Gladiator being a badass. So I want to talk about the Xavier stuff just all at once because I think it'll be easier. What is notable, though, is that unlike the 4th episode, which was kind of 2 half episodes, this one they went back and forth. And I think the reason is obvious to me. I think there are a lot of thematic connections between what is going on with Xavier and what is going on with Storm. Like Xavier is seemingly like trying to gain back his humanity and gain the ability, like wanting to go back to Earth and struggling with that decision. And Storm kind of struggling with the decision, but also wanting to get her powers back as well. So thematically, there was more consistency. That's why we get a lot of back and forth between these two storylines. But in terms of Xavier, like he has a life with Lilandra. He is no longer dying. And the idea is that these two are going to get married. But Deathbird, of course, being the evil younger sister, does not want them to get married and basically says that if Xavier is to become a member of the family, so to speak, then he has to forfeit all of his memories from Earth, specifically of his X-Men. And this leads, I mean, the back and forth here is just really good. This is a really well executed episode. And look, episode 5 is going to be the standard bearer episode by which all others are compared, I think. I mean, episode 6 is kind of incredible too. And what ends up happening is that Xavier is, very hesitant because of what's going on and not really knowing and wanting to see his students again. So we get the best use. It feels like Xavier is exploring the meta narrative by talking about like how he's been holding back and then he literally puts everybody into a classroom on the astral plane. Brian, my favorite visual of this is Gladiator in a school desk. That is one of the funniest things that this show could have given us. That is a gift that I don't want to be mistaken.
See, this is where they're getting fun with the powers again, because I don't think we've ever seen Xavier do something crazy like this before. It's usually like getting someone's mind, go through their memories, try to help them. In this case, he literally created this alternate mental reality in the astral plane, and he's like, "Students, we're gonna teach you some lessons today," and it's really the Shi'ar people trying to teach them about humanity and how they're wrong, sort of. Well, not sort of. They are wrong. They're fucking colonists, and they're going from planet to planet, trying to take over. And then all the planets that are a threat to them potentially down the line, they're just trying to eliminate them all. So I think Xavier kind of fucked up, and I think he, I don't know, I think he thinks, like you said, I think he thinks he's in love with Galandria, but I don't know. I feel like he may be using her and he knows it, and I just feel like that's gonna haunt Xavier down the line, because usually there's something
perhaps
dark.
I mean, I don't know. It's
kind of like what he did with Phoenix, right? He didn't tell her that,
yeah.
she suppressed the powers. So if it's going to benefit him in the long term, and he thinks it's going to benefit the X-Men in the long term, then yeah, I think he's working her, man, because he just doesn't seem like he's committed. He just seems like the guy that's there, like a Paul Atreides. You know what I'm saying? Like, compared him to Paul Atreides. And I think Paul Atreides was more sincere with Chani, to be honest. So I just get this vibe, man, that he's using her, and she's starting to realize.
I don't know that he's using. I don't know that he's consciously using her. I would put it and frame it that way. I just think that
dead without her. He would be dead without her, and he knows that, and he had no choice but to go with her. So,
yes.
It's that or death.
I mean, like I said, I think he thinks he's in love with her, and he's not in a romantic love with her. I think that the way they connected in season 3, like, clearly that has an effect on him, because I mean, she understands him better than almost anybody could, because they're both telepaths and they both have this immense power, and like, just from, like, they have actual mutant powers, but they also have like practical power. Like, Xavier is very influential in the mutant community, and Lalandra is the leader of her people. So I think there's that element to it as well. But Xavier, eventually things go haywire on the astral plane. He sees Gambit turn into a skeleton and basically figures out that something is terribly, terribly wrong. I want to point this out. I think this is super important. This is done with a purpose. Gambit is shown as essentially dead. Magneto is not. So I think, as rightly has been pointed out by a lot of people, Magneto is not dead.
I keep hearing that he's going to come back as a bad guy again, but I just don't want. I feel like he's accomplished too much in his arc this season and transformed his character too much to let that happen. I just feel like that would be regressing.
I think he might temporarily be bad, just like the Apocalypse movie. Except,
I mean, I get it. He's pissed. He's really pissed, and believe me, he has every right to be. But I don't know, man. I just feel like some of the lines he's been delivering is just those fire lines, man. It's inspiring stuff. I mean, I think the line that gets me the most is like, "I'm trying to be a better person." It's like, that's the most relatable thing that anyone can say and relate to another human being, I think. So I hope you're right that he's not dead, but man, I hope he doesn't do evil deeds to lose that goodwill that he had going. We'll see. But yeah, I think I don't know, that sign that Gambit was a skeleton. Maybe that's a permanent thing now that Gambit is gone for good. But I just hope not. For the love of God, please no. Because that was a sign. I was like, oh shit, is that a permanent thing? Are they gonna make it permanent? I hope not. But yeah, I just think that
you know what,
Mr. Lesson plan. He didn't finish his lesson plan with the aliens. So I'm just a little curious about that, because that leaves a lot on the table. It feels like they're going to invade after Xavier goes back. It just feels like, oh, they're going to invade Earth or something like that because you pissed them off. You know what I mean? I think you pissed them off.
I'm sure that's going to get resolved. I don't know. Like, we'll see. How interested is this show in doing the cosmic part? Like, they have an obligation to do part of it because of the Lalandra Xavier ending to the previous series, but how interested are they going to be in that moving forward? I think we're gonna see very quickly, depending how the rest of the season goes, because I don't know. it feels like they are more interested in the dynamics of the X-Men as opposed to like the things that the animated series did. But I could absolutely be wrong on this. But what I'm not wrong about is how great the Storm part is. I think this is I mean, episode 5 was really tragic. Episode 6 with Storm getting her powers back. It is great stuff. Like it was pretty predictable, but just the way that they do it, bringing her back to her full powers, the score. I mean, the Storm music. Like when that music hits, like shit's about to go down, and it's great work. The Newton Brothers, what they were able to produce is just really good stuff. Brian, this is your department. You're the one that really was kind of emphasizing that what was going to happen was going to happen. So I'm going to let you take over and kind of describe what happened and how right you were.
So basically, this unresolved storyline from the original 5 seasons of Storm not overcoming her claustrophobia. And when I saw her lose her powers, I was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to tie both in. And look who was right, me. But look, I mean, it wasn't that hard to figure out because, I mean, if you're going to overcome something, what's the character's biggest fear? Okay, so it's claustrophobia, tight spaces. So how do you accomplish that? Well, let's have Forge get hurt, and you have to get this flower from a cave, and the cave is very narrow and dark and tight. You see where it goes. So you kind of you kind of see where it's starting to go, and it's like, oh, she's going to overcome this thing about tight spaces that they left kind of like unfulfilled in the seasons beforehand, and they went right to it. And then as soon as I started seeing some of the hallucinations, for some reason, I immediately thought, I wonder if they're going to do the Kill Bill thing. And wouldn't you know it, they did the Kill Bill thing where she's in the coffin and she's trying to grasp for air and she sees all the different faces in the wood. Of course, there's that Ryan Reynolds movie, Buried, as well. But yeah, I just think that it was the right moment to do something like that. And it was very metaphorical, and it got right to it. And she overcomes these fears, and overcoming those fears leads to her something going off in her head. And I don't know if it was like, see now I'm thinking like maybe it's it's psychosomatic or something. Maybe there is no actual thing to suppress the mutant powers. Maybe it's all mental. I don't know. But it just seems like it was all in her head, and all of a sudden it just turned on again. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to go into that a little more, or they're going to have this big revelation that there was never like a cure anyway, and it was just like all in her head, which would be very interesting. But
or did Forge's machine actually work, and then she had to overcome the mental barrier?
Oh boy, Forge, man! I'm hearing things about Forge, man. What I'm hearing is that he might have this guilt about actually being the one that came up with the ideas for the Sentinels, and that would make a lot of sense considering he's a technical genius, and we've seen him all over the timeline. And that would be a great arc for him.
I feel like there's some over theorizing, but that one actually makes sense.
Because I mean, you got to give that guy an arc anyway. It's not, he can't just be a support system for Storm and that's it, and we wave him off and see him in the future again. It feels like they set him up for something, and you kind of we've got to know him these last couple episodes in the life death stuff. So I feel like they're gonna do this thing where they're gonna reveal it and then make Storm turn on him, and then he's gonna have to gain trust back and all that kind of thing. But I just love the visual art style of that bird or owl, whatever that creature was called. I don't know what that. It's like a demon or something that's been haunting Forge and his family for generations, apparently, and it just screamed Hayao Miyazaki, like straight out of Spirited Away, or yeah, it was basically the old lady from Spirited Away that turned into the giant bird. So that's what the vibe I was getting, and I was like, oh, they're using all the right visual cues and inspirations for this, tying in with the whole overcoming your darkest fears thing to gate your powers back. So I thought the writing on the life death stuff was just fantastic, all the way to her getting her powers back. Very, very powerful stuff because it's all about overcoming your fear, So when you do that, I think that's a great story arc where you expose yourself to your weaknesses and then you pay it off by overcoming it and becoming even stronger as a person. So I thought that was great stuff. And this is finally Storm's I wouldn't say coming out party, but I feel like Storm is finally getting the main event push that she's been deserving. I felt like she's been getting that Intercontinental title, U.S. title kind of push in the original run. But now I feel like that they acknowledge her as this Omega level threat.
Really bad storylines. I think that there were 2 Shadow King episodes, one of which prominently featured Storm. There's the Garrox stuff with the Savage Land that just a lot of goofiness with her character. And this just feels like, okay, now we're treating her like a goddess. Like, this is what her character should have been the whole time. But I think it's great. It's really, really great what they've done with Storm. It's so interesting. And I really love this episode too. Like, as great as episode 5 was, and it is, I can't imagine it not being my favorite episode at the end of the series. And if episodes 8, 9, and 10 are even better, then I mean, this is probably the best show of the year. But I mean, episode 6 on its own is also really great, just because of the Xavier stuff and Storm, and just exploring these two characters and really putting the emphasis. Like, they've done a great job putting emphasis in the right places, and I am so curious to see where we end up. I mean, I think the thing about this season is it's going to leave us wanting more, and I think that's a good thing. I think 10 episodes and wanting more, I think that's, given where we're at with the state of streaming TV, and it feels like this 8-episode miniseries should have been like a 2-hour movie. I'm okay with wanting more, because we're going to get more seasons, and that's pretty exciting. Even though Bo DeMeo is no longer associated with the series, I'm really excited to see where they go. And like I said, episode 5 is, if episode 5 is like an 11 out of 10, episode 6 is like a 9.5. I mean, I think it is that good.
For sure. And I wanted to point out quickly that years ago, I did call my shot saying Red Skull would come back in Infinity War, and randomly he showed up, and he was played by Ross Marquardt. And guess who's the voice of the returning Professor X in this episode? Ross Marquardt.
Yeah, I figured you were going to bring that up. I also want to point out, the Watcher is definitely in episode 5. It feels like that's all but confirmed at this point.
Yeah, we see his image. So
I really hope we get no interactions between the What If universe and this, because What If is not good.
I think it's signaling that it's a seminal event. It's one of those things that is going to be, either it's one of those events you have to go back in time and fix, or it's something that you have to like kind of learn from, and the mutant society has to evolve after this, so to speak, this tragic event. So I don't know. I'm debating every now and again, should they go back in time and fix it? Should they stick with the consequences and make them stick? I don't know, but it's kind of like arguing whether or not in Endgame should they go back in time and fix everything and bring everyone back like everyone wants, or just leave it and have these dire consequences of what happens. So it's interesting, but I think they're going to go the happy route. And the next episode, his name is Bright Eyes, or the episode title is Bright Eyes, which is a reference to not Planet of the Apes, obviously, but Cable. So I think we're going to get that Cable backstory. And I'm hoping that we see it from his perspective, and then we kind of end the episode with him fading away as he says hello to his mom for the first time. That's kind of what I want.
Yeah, that would seem to make the most sense. I think the background about Cable, and especially we know that the 8, 9, and 10 are going to be the 3-episode finale. I'm very curious, because obviously Cable's going to play a factor. How much are we going to see of the other X-Men in the episode 2? I just don't feel like you can just do a Cable episode and have no one else be involved. That would just be very, very strange. I'm sure Bishop is in some way, he has to be involved, of course. And we'll see where that goes. So as a reminder, definitely continue to check out the Not Content podcast. We are discussing a wide variety of topics, recently covering An Officer and a Gentleman. Later on this week on the podcast, we will be discussing 2 Planet of the Apes sequels. We are going to be getting back into baseball season as well. We have something very fun planned for the first week of May with The Right Match. So continue to check out the podcast as well as what we do here on YouTube. So for Brian, any final thoughts before we end the show?
Captain America. I don't know where he's coming. I don't know when he's coming.
Shield is in the trailer, so he's very good. And he has been in episode prior, so this is not an MCU thing. This is very much something that they have done in the past. So we will see where it goes. For Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening.